Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman, and today we are going to talk about why conventional financial advice only leads to a conventional life. I firmly believe that most of the advice that Americans are following today is designed to keep them from going broke, but it is not designed to help you actually become wealthy. I think money is just a tool, and when we use that tool correctly, it can help us build a life that we are really excited to live. Thanks for joining us today here at New School Millionaire, where we're going to change the way you think about money so that you're not doing things the old school way and getting old school results. You're going to shift your thinking so that you can become a new school millionaire. I'm so excited today to give you a history lesson because this is the context you need to begin to understand why you keep hearing the same advice over and over and over again. We're going to take a little time travel walk in history, and we are going to go back to 1945, post World War II. Because I want you to understand that financial advice and this idea of retirement, the way we think about it today, didn't exist as recently as 80 years ago. What do I mean? Well, if you go back in time to 1945, what you will find is that life expectancy at that particular date was about 63 years old. So if life expectancy was before the time we normally think of retirement age, there wasn't a whole lot to plan for. Sure, people lived longer than that, but just as many people didn't. So let's think about the environment that is happening at that point in time. So people are coming back from the war, they're rejoining the workforce, and employers are trying to attract intelligent, affluent individuals to come and work for their company. Think about the idea of a pension. That's something that very, very little of the population has today, unless you are in the government sector. If you think about how a pension works, an employer is going to say to somebody, you come work for me for 40 plus years, and whenever you retire, I'm going to pay 80% of the income you were making when you were working for me for as long as you're retired. Well, that seems like a pretty good deal today, but when you start thinking about what that meant back then, it meant that about the time you were getting ready to retire, if you made it that long, you probably weren't going to have that many years to enjoy that particular offer. So if you think about it from the employer's perspective, it's a great deal. I get to lock you up for 40 years of productivity, and maybe I have to pay a few years of additional income, but I'm not having to rehire somebody at different price points and dealing with people shopping me to get the most competitive offer. Because if you walk away from me as the employer, you walk away from your pension. So that is a golden handcuff if ever I have thought of one. But think about what that really means too. It means that if you do retire, between Social Security and your pension, you have almost 100% of your income taken care of, and those paychecks are guaranteed for as long as you live. So that means there's very little pressure on you as an individual to save money because your income is already going to be taken care of when you retire. So think about that. Really, if you decide you're going to save money and work with a financial advisor in that environment, the only role that that advisor plays is to generate a rate of return in order to grow your net worth, because your retirement income is already taken care of, right? Is that true today? If you do not have a pension, or even if you do, and it's not going to make up 80% of what you are earning during your working lifetime, now there's a change because you have to build money. You have to actually grow your wealth, and then you have to turn that into reliable and sustainable, safe income streams when you get to retirement. So let's kind of stay in that pensiony kind of role. So if I'm an employer and I am creating what's called an insured pension, that means that every year I'm going to have an audit because I am not only contributing to the pension plan, but I am making sure that it is solvent. And if for some reason the investments run out in an insured pension plan, the company or the entity that is insuring it will take over making payments in the event of an insolvency. So obviously, if they're going to guarantee that, they're going to check on the health of the plan to make sure that it is properly funded. So if you think about kind of the mechanics of this pension, what happens is if there's 100 people, some people are going to pass away before that age of 63, and then others are going to live substantially longer. So the people who pass away before they ever receive payments, the accounts that were sort of associated with their life participation are now going to be redirected to fund the people who live a longer period of time. And so instead of just having to guess, well, how long is this one individual going to live? And now we've got to plan for life potential. What they're actually able to do is spread the risk along a large enough portion of the population that they only have to make sure that they can produce income to life expectancy. So that sounds really great if life expectancy is actually before retirement. But if you look at the data, almost every year since 1945, life expectancy has gotten longer and longer and longer in the United States. And while there are a few exceptions to that, like the time period we were all coping with COVID, most of the years we see a change. So that if you look at life expectancy today, it's about 80 years old. And if you make it to age 65, it actually shifts out to 85 years old because the people who have made it that far are generally pretty healthy. So if you think about it now, if you're retiring at 65, there's at least 20 years of planning that goes into that if you're in a pension plan. But if it is just you that we are planning for, we have to look at life potential, which is a much longer period of time. In fact, the oldest living person today is 117 years old. So at a minimum, we need to make sure we're going out to age 100 for sustainable income, if not longer. So let's go back here, and we're talking about these pension plans. So if every year we do an audit of this pension plan and the company doing the audit says, well, life expectancy has shifted, you're underfunded, not only do you need to catch up on what you were contributing, but you need to change how you're funding to a larger amount moving forward. And that happens every single year. At some point, I'm going, oh my gosh, now instead of guaranteeing maybe for the people that happen to live longer than 63, a few years of income, I'm looking at an entire population that is now going to need 20 years of income. And some people are going to need income beyond that. And so now this sort of pension that was such a good deal for the employer before becomes almost unmanageable because it is so expensive to keep it going, because the pressure is not to make contributions, it's to make contributions and manage the growth of the asset so that it can pay everybody in the pension plan for as long as they live. That is real pressure when you're also trying to run a profitable business. So business owners are thinking, this is maybe not such a good deal anymore. Meanwhile, I want to give you guys an idea of what's happening in roughly 1978. So 1978 is when the 401k enters the tax code. And the 401k is probably the most commonly recommended vehicle for wealth building strategies in the United States today. At some point in time, we have all heard the advice, max out your 401k. So I want you to see what's happening, because as the 401k ends up as a choice in the business owner's world, they're thinking, wait a minute, I can take all of the risk of this pension, I can eliminate it. I can then instead just say, hey, if you put money in, I'll match it, and maybe I'll give you some profit sharing. But if that money doesn't do well and it's not there for you in retirement, that's not my responsibility. So the employers are looking at that going, whoo, this is great. This is the relief that I've been looking for. And if you think about it from an employee perspective, most employees are thinking, hey, this is a great deal because now the money is in an account that I can choose the investment. So I have control over what it's invested in. And if I leave, I can take this money with me to my next employer. So I can continue to own this. And, sometimes I think about this, and here's the psychology that I think is so important for understanding why this switch was made. Because now we're all like, oh my gosh, I would kill to have a pension. But when you think about that particular environment, it's interesting at seminars when I say, how many of you would like to stop contributing to Social Security so that you have the ability to take that money, control it, and grow your own wealth? And usually the majority of hands go up so that they have the ability to really control their destiny. That's part of who we are as Americans. We want to make our own way. And so there was very little pushback at the point in time where that control was given to the individuals, because we weren't really quite sure what we were giving up in that environment either. So here's where I promised you some of the tax information. I'm going to share my screen real quick. And what you can see here on my screen now is a history of the top federal tax bracket at any point in history. So specifically what we're looking at is not the overall tax rate or even the effective tax rate. It's just the highest bracket that someone could be taxed in. So when we look at this, you can see in 1913, the highest bracket was about 7% right here. And so if you look at what was happening, this was the first year taxes existed. 1913 is what we said. There you go. So if you earned over $500,000 of income in 1913, any dollar you earned above 500,000 was taxed at 7%. Now, at this point in time, the collection arm of the IRS didn't really exist. This affected very, very few families, only the uber wealthy, when you start thinking about how inflation goes into these calculations. And it was pretty much done on the honor system. In World War I, you can see the tax rates jump pretty dramatically for anything earned over $1 million. You can see the top bracket was 77%. How quickly we went from 7% to 77%. But when the war is over, everything drops back down again. And then you can see that it goes back up, it goes up. And then when you get right here, and you are looking at 1941, right before we go into World War II, the tax rate was 81%, but only on dollars earned above 5 million. So very few people. But here's the thing I always like to make sure we understand. You and I do not have direct control over the tax rate. So as World War II begins, the tax rates change. Now, anyone earning over 200,000 is going to pay 88 cents out of every dollar they earn above 200 to the US government. And that happened in 1 year. So the lack of control over the brackets, I think, is important to keep in mind when you are figuring out what you want to do. But I'm getting to the conclusion here in 1978. I do think it's really, really important to understand that we have had a marginal tax bracket that is as high as 94%. And that there was an entire decade in US history where the highest marginal bracket was above 91%. So now if we fast forward to 1978, right here, the highest marginal bracket was 70%. So for anyone whose household was making $200 in 1978, every dollar they earned above that, they had to give 70 cents to the government in taxes. But then the 401k entered the tax code. And so now I could take my money, I could put it into the 401k, and rather than having 30 cents to invest because I had to pay taxes, I get to defer when I pay the taxes, and my entire dollar goes into the 401k and begins earning for me. So for anyone who made this bet and said, I am going to defer when I pay the taxes, I'm going to put the money into the 401k and max it out, you can see that if they are withdrawing money today, the tax rate is very different. The highest marginal rate is 37%. So the amount of relief that that provides, you think about what's really happening. Not only do I get to control the money and I could take it with me if I go somewhere else, but I also have the ability to keep an entire dollar earning for me instead of having only 30 cents earning for me. And I'm crossing my fingers that whenever I finally spend the money, I'm going to be in a very different tax bracket. So that would have been a great bet for us. Now, here's where I think things get more interesting, is that that's the advice that our parents were following. Because when you think about this, for somebody who is 21 in 1978, just graduating from college, getting their first job, today they would be 67 years old. So the very first people who started maxing out their 401k in order to build for retirement are retiring right now, which means we don't have a single full case study for somebody who is going to invest for their entire working lifetime in their 401k and then take money out to spend, which means that we are all somebody's experiment if this is what we're doing right now, because we don't have the data from a single person's full working lifetime and the addition of the data from their retirement. I don't know about you, but I find that to be particularly scary. The other thing is that if I am in a 37% tax bracket right now, I'm not entirely sure that I want to defer when I pay the taxes. And the reason that I'm saying that is because when you look at the average of the top marginal bracket, if I click this button here, the average is 56, almost 57%. And right now we're in an environment where it's 37. So not only are we below the average highest marginal threshold, but we're below it by a substantial amount. And so where it made sense for our parents to defer when they were paying taxes, we need to ask ourselves, does it still make sense for us to defer the taxes when we are at really a pretty low point in historical tax rates? So if you think about this like interest rate environment, I want to lock in the lowest interest rate I can. Taxes are not different. I want to lock in the lowest tax rate I can. And that means that I can't just keep repeating the information I'm hearing because it made sense for a previous generation. I need to start asking myself, does it still make sense for me? Because there's only a few small blips in the entire history of our country where the tax rate was lower than it is today. So this is just a context. Do I defer when I pay the taxes and hope that taxes go down in the future? Or do I go ahead and pay the taxes today so that I don't have the risk exposure of tax rates going up in the future? Again, just questions you need to ask yourself so that you're making the right decisions for yourself. So I'm going to go back to this real quick. If I think about what's happening in an environment where you've got your pension and you know Social Security is going to take care of your income, you have to focus on rate of return because it's the only real way to measure whether your financial advisor is doing a truly good job for you. The problem is that when we shifted to 401ks, we continued to only focus on rate of return. And what we abandoned was the focus on income creation that we got inside the pension system with the safety net of spreading risk across predictable life expectancies that incrementally kept going up. But now we're in a position where not only are we chasing rate of return with no real idea of how that's going to translate into income, we're hoping that what the experts tells us is accurate. But again, we don't have a single case study for somebody actually funding and maxing out their retirement plan and then actually retiring and following them through the rest of their lifetime. So I think it's time that we get back to this idea of income creation and we start focusing on how we can create income streams that allow you to increase the efficiency of how much income you can spend. Here at New School Millionaire, what we're going to teach you is how shifting the focus to income creation is going to change what you get to enjoy during your lifetime. In fact, shifting to hitting the easy button for income creation could mean that you get to spend as much as 30 to 70% more income every year of your retirement without you having to work harder, without you having to save more money and without you having to take additional risk. We're going to do all of this through efficiency, and we're going to start to look at a balanced approach between how fast is my money growing for me, what is my rate of return, and how much of this can I safely and sustainably enjoy during my lifetime. And we're going to pull on research from very prominent PhDs to show you how looking at the entire suite of financial tools available to you with the purpose of efficient income creation can dramatically change what you get to spend and enjoy today and in the future. So we're going to pull you out of this mindset that says I have to defer gratification and defer and minimize my life and save more and more so that one day I can retire, only to hear my advisor tell me, just kidding, you can't really spend a lot of money or live your dream life now because you might run out of money. We want to eliminate that old school way of thinking so that you get more fulfillment and more enjoyment out of your life without having to take additional risk, because we've got efficiency on our side. And that is the new school millionaire way. Stick around. We're going to give you all the cheat codes for how you can increase your income without having to do any of those things that you don't want to do. Thanks for spending some time with us today. I'll see you next time.